The most dangerous thing about ancient water was that it could look perfectly safe. A clear river, a quiet spring, a small pool between rocks. Nothing looked wrong. But hidden inside that water could be parasites, bacteria, or waste from an animal that had visited the same place hours earlier. Today, we would never drink from a random puddle. Ancient humans had no such luxury, so how did they survive without clean water? The answer is not that their bodies were somehow immune to dirty water. They survived because they became extremely good at choosing the least dangerous water available. For early humans, finding water was one of the most important survival skills. They learned to read the landscape. A group crossing a dry region could watch birds, follow animal tracks, look for greener vegetation, or search for places where rain collected naturally. A hollow in a rock could hold rainwater for days. Certain plants could reveal that groundwater was nearby, and animals could become living maps. If many animals repeatedly moved toward one part of the landscape, there was a good chance they were going somewhere important. Usually that meant water, but finding water was only half the problem. The next question was much more dangerous. Could you drink it? Ancient humans could not see bacteria. They did not know what parasites were, but they could observe consequences. If people repeatedly became sick after drinking from one pool, they could learn to avoid it. If a spring remained reliable through a dry season, it became valuable. If a river was cleaner upstream than downstream, people could notice that too. They did not need to understand the science, they only needed to recognize the pattern. This created one of humanity's earliest forms of technology, shared memory. An older person could remember where water appeared after rain. A hunter could know which valley contained a spring. A family could know which pool became dangerous during the hottest part of the year. That information was passed from one generation to the next. The map existed inside people's heads. Food helped as well. Fruits, roots, leaves, vegetables, and fresh meat all contained water. But eventually, every group needed a dependable source of drinking water. And that is where humans began changing the landscape. One of the most important inventions was the well. A natural spring could disappear. A river could change course. A pond could dry up. But groundwater could remain beneath the settlement. By digging down, people could reach water without constantly moving to a new source. Some ancient wells were remarkably advanced. People reinforced the walls with timber or stone so the shaft would not collapse. A well was not simply a hole in the ground. It was an investment in the future, and wells became especially important when humans began farming. A mobile hunter-gatherer group could leave when the local water supply failed. Farmers could not. They had invested months of work into one location. Once humans settled permanently, reliable water became part of the structure of society. Villages grew near rivers and springs. Fields were planted where water could reach them. Rain was collected and stored. Eventually, people began building reservoirs and larger systems that could supply entire communities. Water was no longer something humans simply found. They began to control it, and that changed civilization. Reliable water allowed agriculture to expand. More people created larger settlements, and larger settlements created a new problem: waste. A small group can move away from a dirty campsite. A city cannot. Thousands of people living together produce enormous amounts of waste. If that waste reaches the water supply, the consequences can be devastating. So humans had to solve a second problem, not just finding water, keeping the water away from everything else. Ancient communities developed drainage systems, storage tanks, channels, wells, and other forms of water infrastructure. Some societies eventually became extremely skilled at transporting water over long distances. But these systems were not perfect. Ancient people still suffered from waterborne disease. They still had contaminated wells. The difference was that their methods gradually became better. They learned to protect important sources. They separated waste from drinking areas. They collected rain. They allowed sediment to settle. They sometimes heated water. And they used simple materials to remove visible impurities. None of this required modern germ theory. People could discover useful techniques simply by observing what happened afterward. Imagine heating water because you wanted to cook. You do not know that invisible organisms are being destroyed. You only know that some methods seem to result in fewer problems. The same thing could happen with filtering. A cloth could remove dirt and insects. A container could allow mud to sink. The water looked cleaner. That did not make it perfectly safe, but it improved the situation. Ancient humans were often solving problems they could not even properly describe. And water was not only a practical resource, it became cultural and religious. Springs, rivers, and wells were often considered sacred. That may sound completely separate from water management, but sacred rules could also protect a water source. If people believed a spring was holy, they might avoid polluting it. A religious rule could therefore have a practical environmental effect. As societies became larger, control over water became a source of power. Someone had to decide how water was distributed during a drought. Water could determine where a city was built and how large it could become. It could support farms, animals, workshops, homes, and entire economies. The modern world has made this almost invisible. You turn a handle, water appears. You drink it, you flush a toilet, the waste disappears. It feels automatic. But behind that simple action is an enormous system of reservoirs, pipes, pumps, treatment plants, filters, testing, and maintenance. Ancient humans had none of that. They had observation, they had memory, they had cooperation, and they had thousands of years of trial and error. So did ancient humans have clean water? Usually not in the modern sense. What they had was something more important for survival. They learned how to find better water. They learned how to avoid the worst sources. They learned how to store it. They learned how to protect it. And eventually they learned how to move it wherever they needed it. Their success was not because dirty water was harmless. It was because humans became very good at learning from mistakes. A dangerous pool became a warning. A reliable spring became a settlement. A well became infrastructure. A channel became a city. And thousands of years later, all of that knowledge became something we barely notice. A glass of water from a tap. So the next time you drink water, without thinking about it, remember how extraordinary that simple act really is. Your ancestors once had to follow animal tracks, dig beneath dry riverbeds, memorize hidden springs, and decide whether a suspicious puddle was worth the risk. We inherited their survival instincts. We just replaced the puddle with plumbing.